I welcome you all to the podcast on U.S. India cooperation in defense technology transfer and production. It is my great pleasure to welcome our guest speaker for today's episode, Dr. Sameer Lalwani, a senior expert, South Asia United States Institute of Peace, and non-resident senior fellow at the Center for Strategic and Budgetary Assessments. Dr. Lalwani, term member with the Council of Foreign Affairs and contributing editor to War on the Rocks. A very warm welcome to you, sir, to Christ University. So, sir, let me hop on to the very first question. When I talk about the initiatives that the both countries are taking in, what do you think are the various initiatives taken by both countries in the domain of defense tech and transfer?
So I think we'd have to start with the most significant one that's currently in play, which is the Initiative on Critical and Emerging Technologies. This is an initiative that was run out of the White House and the Prime Minister's office, essentially. And I think that's sort of the first point I want to make, which is that it has very clear high-level political leadership on both ends because it was decided to be run out of national security advisors' offices. And that allows for a lot of troubleshooting and overcoming of various bureaucratic veto points or just inefficiencies. And then the second part of that is that as this flagship initiative, the first and biggest and highest value project that was launched from this is essentially this cooperation on GE F414 engines, aero engines that will power Indian fighter jets and directly contribute to India's defense and deterrence posture vis-a-vis China. So I think having sort of this very high level, visible, and consequential project provides an umbrella for a whole host of other types of cooperation. And the analogy I would draw to is we all know about the AUKUS agreement between Australia, the UK, and the United States. And the high value, high visibility project is the nuclear submarine. But the real value of AUKUS is everything that follows from that, the Pillar 2 stuff, the collaboration on emerging technologies and emerging defense technologies. And so in a way, what we've done with India, with the United States and India have done together, is to build this sort of high value project, but underneath that umbrella, there'll be a whole bunch of other defense technology initiatives and cooperations that stream into the GE engine deal, but also are independent of it. And so in that sense, the other part, I would say, of ISET is something that the White House and the Prime Minister's office put out in January of 2023, which was, they called it initially the Defense Innovation Bridge, but essentially was try to co-link our innovation ecosystems that develop and innovate novel technologies for the battlefield that can be large systems or even small subsystems. And it metastasized into something called Indus X, the India-U.S. Defense Acceleration Ecosystem. And that is a process that I think is ongoing and being developed, but was really significant even there as sort of an important benchmark is the ability to identify the right nodes of the bureaucracy that will now collaborate together, build the institutionalized process for collaboration. So now this is basically IDEX on the Indian side and the Defense Innovation Unit on the US side. They've now a process for collaboration. They set out sort of a set of goals, and they put it on paper, and then they started following through on those goals. So the most notable one, I think, was issuing joint challenges. And joint challenges sort of sounds a little anodyne and maybe a little too wonky and scientific, but the purpose of a joint challenge is essentially you're identifying that we have joint contingencies that might arise. We have joint sort of assessments of the problem, and therefore we get to issuing joint challenges to both our industries to solve those problems so that we will be able to work better together and address our deterrence challenges together. So I think that sort of that move that has taken place within the first year of Indus X, agreed on joint challenge framework, launched the first joint challenge on maritime domain problems, underwater communications, and I believe a domain awareness problem set, and then had the pitches from the companies and advanced to the final round where they were issued awards. And that was all sort of actually within 6 months. So I think we've really sort of seen a lot of progress in the joint challenge framework. And then from there, we're going on to building sort of more robust industrial partnerships, building a testing consortium where you're sort of linking academic labs and private sector labs that will allow for the flow of startups and small medium enterprises to test their prototypes and their new technology developments in each other's labs, both to validate them, to sort of assess the quality of the prototype and whether it sort of meets certain benchmarks, but also to showcase these technologies to other observers, including other companies that might want to invest in them, to acquire them, to source from them, or to innovate off of them.
Thank you so much, sir. That was quite a detailed understanding on this. So moving on, sir, what do you think are the limitations in this relationship between the US? And from your perspective, since you come from the United States, what do you think is the US perspective of the limitations that the partnership has right now?
Sure. Well, look, the challenge in any cooperative venture between countries, and frankly any sort of political initiative, is the continuity of the politics, right? So in the case of the U.S. and India, we're talking about sort of continuity of leadership, and not necessarily leadership in the sense of the same president or the same prime minister or the same government, but really sort of a commitment to that process, right? So in the United States, we talk about there's a lot of divides, partisan divides within the United States on a whole host of issues, but there are probably two major areas of deep agreements. So one is the challenge of China as sort of the leading foreign policy, national security challenge for the United States over the next several decades. And the other is a joint, sort of a bipartisan consensus that India is a very important partner in addressing that challenge. And so that continuity is very important, and I think has been the ballast for the relationship across 5 administrations and hopefully 5 more to go. I think that's sort of the baseline of it. So I actually don't see that as a limitation. I think that as an opportunity, but were that bipartisan consensus to be ruptured because of political events, because of sort of choices made by either party, that would be concerning for the progress of defense technology cooperation. It has still not yet achieved its own sort of self-momentum. It requires sort of the political support to stimulate it. I think the second challenge is maybe regulatory, and that is one that I think is also a manageable and solvable challenge, but we're dealing with two, as I sort of hear other colleagues say, two great democracies with two great big bureaucracies, right? And those bureaucracies are set in their ways about the procedures for how they go through acquisitions or how they go through sales and technology releases. And we can learn how to work within those systems and try to expedite the processes. But I don't think we're going to totally break our bureaucracies, right? Our bureaucracies have been forged over sort of many, many decades of path dependence. And while we can sort of make adjustments at the margins, we can drive bureaucratic innovation at the political level. I don't think we're going to totally change like the U.S. export control system or the Indian Make in India system. And so we have to sort of come to terms with those. And then when there are problems at the margins, utilize sort of the political support on both sides to solve them. And the third limitation, I'd say, that's it's more in the future, and it is more about what is the ceiling of this relationship. And you'll hear a lot of U.S. and American analysts talk about when the United States shares technology with its partners and allies, it does so with an expectation that they're going to be those technologies will be utilized and leveraged for a joint security or foreign policy interest, right? So sharing technology in the abstract is fine. Sometimes there's commercial value in it. Sometimes there's, you could say, altruism in it. But I think when you get to the higher levels of technology, there's an expectation that there is a strategic benefit and a strategic transaction. And so in the case of the United States, I think what we're seeing is that the U.S. is looking to burden share its deterrent responsibilities. There's a phrase that comes out of the U.S. National Defense Strategy. It's called integrated deterrence. And the idea is to integrate deterrence burdens with all our partners and allies so that the U.S. is not the only one having to balance against Chinese aggression or revisionist aggression in the Indo-Pacific. And so to do that, the more that other countries are willing to share that burden, to integrate deterrence, and to go in on joint missions, joint operations, joint peacetime operations that contribute to deterrence, I think the more that the U.S. sees a direct through line with technology sharing and achieving its objectives in its national defense strategy.
Thank you so much, sir. On that positive note, sir, finally, if I would want to conclude, I would just want to ask you, where do you see both the countries? Where are they headed? What are the opportunities and what is the way forward?
Yeah, so I think we've kind of talked, I think really it's about making progress on the things we've already set out for ourselves. We've set out a pretty grand agenda between Initiative on Critical Emerging Technologies, the Defense Industrial Roadmap, the Indus X process. And if you read I've read the White House sort of readout of this, but there's probably an equivalent Indian readout of the Prime Minister's and the U.S. President's joint statement from June of 2023. It is a comprehensive list of I can't remember how many, like sort of like 40, 50, 60 objectives. From jet engines are just sort of one small part of it. There's sort of a space exploration mission, which is sort of leads to a broader objective of security of our interest in space. There's a semiconductor mission. There's quantum research. There's synthetic biology. There's a whole host of areas in which we're trying to link our innovation ecosystem. So I think the large scale objective is that we have two objectives, right? So the first is integrated deterrence, which I just talked about, and that's sort of a near-term military to military defense objective. But the bigger project, I think, over the next several decades is building joint innovation power. And by that, what I mean is linking these two great countries' science and technology ecosystems together to build economies of scale, to have flow of ideas, because innovation derives from sort of thinking about problem sets in a novel way. And if you're stuck in your own country, sort of talking to the same people and talking to the same scientific community, you're not going to innovate out of that. And so having that flow between these two democratic enterprises where there's a great amount of cutting edge thinking and research, that will be sort of the basis of both our innovation power to compete with a country like China that's putting a lot of resources and political effort behind it. So it's that joint innovation power that will be built out of these little initiatives, like these small testing consortium initiatives or the joint challenge initiatives that will start to aggregate up as more and more companies start to work with each other, build industrial partnerships. You start to see more lab to lab cooperation, not just in universities and companies, but seeing our defense labs cooperating together, our energy labs cooperating together, scientists going and doing research in each other's labs and doing cooperative research projects. That, I think, will be the basis of sort of a very long-term and enduring joint innovation collaboration between the U.S. and India.
Thank you so much, sir. All your expertise on this was really much appreciated. And thank you for being with us here today.
It was
we
great
are
to
very
be here.
glad.
Thank you.